Houston Dynamo, Portland Timbers, Sporting Kansas, Los Angeles Galaxy,
Pitch Pass,
Toronto FC, Real Salt Lake, Chicago Fire, Columbus Crew, FC Dallas, New York Red Bulls.
Pitch Pass, your all-access credential to the people that matter in MLS. Here's your host, Greg Roach.
It's Pitch Pass time again. Thank you so much for downloading the episode, and thank you for telling a couple of friends. And if you've subscribed, well, then we thank you times 3. I think we got a good one lined up for you. RSL just keeps churning out results, and the man who scored the winning goal in their match versus Portland Timbers last week, midfielder Ned Grabavoy, is the man who will join us a little bit later on in the show. But first, we talk a little bit about the team that they beat, Portland Timbers, and some other MLS teams that are kind of stumbling out of the blocks as we begin the MLS season with the voice of Major League Soccer for NBC Sports Network. He also does a lot of work with Fox Sports. He's John Strong, and he joins us right now on Pitch Pass. John, how are you, sir?
Doing very well. I appreciate you having me on. It's obviously the chaotic time, I think, with everything MLS and European kind of converging, World Cup on the way. So it seems like every day there's 8 billion things going on to talk about right now.
Yeah, exactly. But, you, though, what do you do during this lull? Because you guys don't have a match this weekend, correct?
We don't have an MLS game this weekend. I've got a Europa League game Thursday down in L.A., and then I've got the joys of the 4-month-old son and the dog and the cat and the wife who's looking for me to make up for the fact that I'm gone half the time. So lull is a very relative term in my life these days. Totally
true. Well, I want to talk about the team that is in the city that you're based, which would, of course, be the Portland Timbers. But let's start with the match that you guys covered this past weekend. Two teams still kind of treading water, I guess, which puts them in a better situation than, say, Portland, as they try to find their way. New England and Chicago. What did you take away from that match as far as checking out those two teams and maybe why they're struggling right now and who's more likely to turn it back around?
Yeah, I'm not really sure what to make of Chicago. I mean, they've got Mike McGee, and he's the reigning MVP for a reason. And Quincy Amarikwa is actually one of my favorite kind of early season breakout stars in this league. He's already got to 4 goals, which is a new career high. And he's one of those MLS players that just, he's strong, he's quick, and he's got a little bit of nasty to him, which I think is important. I mean, he's the type of player that will really bug defenders. The problem for me with Chicago is they shipped away 2 very reliable defenders in Jalil Anibaba and Austin Berry. They got caught in this situation of salary cap concerns, and they're trying to re-sign McGee. Even in their midfield, listen, Jeff Laurentowicz is a great player. Alex next to him, I don't know how much he really provides. Harry Shipp is an interesting young player, but it's ever with young players. Are they going to be there consistently throughout the entire season? So, listen, 6 straight ties for them right now. And this is a team that, is kind of digging themselves the same sort of hole as they did last year that they weren't able to drag themselves out of. For New England, it was funny. I literally, just my own personal self, kind of went into the game this weekend thinking, what are the New England Revolution? I mean, they're not a team that's on national TV much. They're not a team that gets a whole lot of media attention in their own market, let alone nationally. And I kind of literally asked the players, and we met with Jay Heaps as well, the question, what do you guys want to be known as? What do you want this identity of the team to be? And they all said, forms of young and exciting. And they certainly have that. And they've got Diego Fagundes, who is such a really interesting young player. Teal Bunbury, could he kind of restart things a little bit? And Jay Heaps is one of the bright young coaches. But I would say of the two of them, I think New England is the one likelier to have success this year, likelier to be in the playoffs. I think they're building something very interesting given how young that roster is. Whether or not they're ready at this time to compete with, the Torontos, and which is crazy to say, and the Kansas Cities and the Columbuses, I'm not entirely sure. But I do think it's two teams that are going to be kind of in that fist fight for spots 4 and 5 in the Eastern Conference all throughout the season.
But going into the season, that's not what I would have expected from New England. And, you ask them what they want to be known for, and I kind of think of them as how they perceive themselves, young and exciting. That excitement hasn't really translated to the early part of this season, and I really can't understand why, because it seems as if they have just added a couple of more useful pieces than they had last year, and last year's team was fun and exciting and young.
Well, I think part of it is just getting on track. Both Fagundes and Bunbury yet to score goals. There's a little bit, Chicago's the same way of where, most of the results they're getting, they're kind of scrambling. There's not an obvious sense of here's what we're going to do, and it's up to you to stop it. It's more kind of, finding a way to scratch and claw. But I think also, too, that's the point of MLS in the first 3 months of the season. I think it's the biggest mistake that we make in this league is we try to draw broad conclusions early on in the year, and it's such an incredibly long season. It's such a forgiving playoff format, and it's just the weirdness of MLS and roster rules and everything else. Things change so much from beginning to end, and so we could absolutely see New England 3, 4, 5 months into the season just kind of treading water, spinning their wheels, and all of a sudden they get hot in August, and we go into the fall and the playoffs talking about, wow, this is a team to be reckoned with, and so I try to hold and reserve too many judgments on any of the teams that we're seeing early in the season just for that very reason.
When do we then look at Teal Bunbury and say, okay, this might not be the same guy that he was pre-injury, or is it still too small of a sample size?
I think it's an excellent question. I think you can apply that to a lot of different players across the league right now. At what point do we switch over to say, you know what, it's just not working? And I think with Teal, he will tell you that it's different this year from last because he's getting regular playing time, which is true. He was in and out of the lineup, and for that matter, he was down to Orlando a couple times last year when he was with Sporting, and yet I'm sure Peter Vermees would tell you, well, he was struggling for consistency, he was struggling for fitness. I'm not going to start him ahead of other guys who deserve that spot. So it's a eye of the beholder type situation. But Bunbury is a guy that he was the breakout young star. He got that opportunity with the national team, and he was going to be this big story, and then it just stalled a little bit. And he hasn't scored a goal since returning from injury, tore the ACL in August of 2012, and came back last summer and hasn't scored a goal since. And, at the end of the day, that's what you're here to do. And you can say, your coach can say, well, look at all these other things, and he works hard, he holds possession, he occupies defenders. If you're not scoring goals as a forward, you're not doing your job. And any other argument is, buying time for that to start happening. And so I guess I don't know the answer to your question other than to say, it's an excellent question, but I think it's a worthwhile thing to be bringing up right now. Is at a certain point, is it ever really entirely? I mean, Charlie Davies is on that team. That's a great example, too. Are we past the point of ever being able to say that Charlie Davies will be what he once was? Or is that being a little bit too harsh? He needs the run, needs the playing time. It's hard to say.
I thought your point about Chicago was a really good one and one that I hadn't considered before. I think too often fans, especially fans like myself who just watch the game and don't really have the analytical knowledge to break down games, think to yourself, oh, okay, well, they've got a lot of great pieces, so the team should be great. And, you just rattled off some really nice pieces, nice to really good pieces to great pieces that Chicago has, but it doesn't seem like when you put that team together on the field, greatness happens.
No, it's true. And I think, again, as much as I kind of came away from that game going, like, I think it's going to be the same Chicago as last year, I think you also need to account for the difference in the fact there's a new coach and a new mind. And, I think the biggest difference with Chicago this year is the fact that, not to say that Frank Yallop is going to be okay if they struggle and miss the playoffs. But Frank Yallop was very upfront and very honest with us when we saw them in D.C. last month and saying, listen, this may be a 2-year thing. We're going to need a lot of time. Part of it, I think, to get out from under what seemingly, apparently, a pretty bad salary cap situation they had been put in. How else can you explain, dumping away Ani Baba and Barry, who are, young defenders I really like a lot. And I think also, too, just trying to adapt maybe to a different style, trying to bring in some new faces. He certainly, has given Amarikwa and Harry Shipp and Benji Hoy, at least early on, some of these young guys, he's given them opportunities to come into the team and show what they can do. But they might not be at that level just yet. And whether it's a matter of they're missing a piece, whether it's a matter of just it's going to take time for the existing pieces to get going. I think one of the biggest questions for Chicago is Mike McGee in year 2. I mean, last year, as much as we all knew Mike McGee was a good player and we all thought highly of him, no one expected for him to explode like that.
Yeah.
No one. And he deservedly wins the MVP, even though the team misses the playoffs. And so the question, I think, can rightly be asked, can he produce that again? As much as people are going to focus their energy and attention on him, that was a big part of New England's game plan is, how to deal with Mike McGee, which ironically, Jay Hayes put it to us, is actually try to get McGee on the ball, because you'd rather have him on the ball where you can track him than off the ball, and he could just pop up all kinds of dangerous places. I think that's where Amarikwa could be huge, because if he's scoring goals early in the year and you're focusing on him, that's where McGee pops up. But, the issue for Chicago last year wasn't that they couldn't score goals. The issue was they couldn't defend them, and I don't know that back line is better this year than it was last year, and that was what killed them in the end, is they couldn't keep goals out. They kept making mistakes late. They kept dropping points, and that's why. And listen, at the end of the day, this is a Chicago team that we looked it up. Since 2007, only Toronto has hired and fired more coaches than the Chicago Fire. They've missed the playoffs far more often than they've made them, for a team that missed the playoffs, I think, just once in their first 9 years. We let the Fire get away with it a little bit because we think of them as long-time, very upstanding team, and they've got a great history about them, and some great names have come through. But this is a group that's still really trying to figure things out amidst a lot of chopping and changing and lack of success. And, as much as Frank Yallop, I think, will rightly say this might be a 2-year process, I think in the short term, I'm not sure we should expect a Chicago Fire team markedly different from the one we saw last year.
It's fascinating because when you were talking, I had a question in my head that during the course of your answer, I was vacillating back on, well, it does make sense. Well, no, it doesn't make sense. And the question was, how did this salary cap situation pop up and surprise Chicago as much as it did? You mentioned they had to jettison both of their center backs. They had to basically dump Chris Rolfe for salary cap reasons. How does that happen to a team? But then as you started to explain, I was like, well, maybe they were surprised at what they got out of Mike McGee initially, and they didn't think that they would have to go and renegotiate and give him a DP or close to DP level deal in this offseason. But then as you finished up your answer, I'm thinking, well, maybe they should be held responsible. Maybe this is another thing that Chicago is kind of under the radar, kind of botching.
Yeah, and again, that's is that the fault of Frank Clovis? Is that the fault of Brian Bliss, the technical director? Is that the fault of who's responsible for those things? And probably the answer is everyone. And at the very least, that's the sense we've gotten from Frank Yallop as a team that's kind of trying to get out from underneath some things. And listen, that's true for everyone. At the best of times, every MLS team goes into the winter going, okay, shoot, how do we figure this out for next year? And guys will take pay cuts and they'll do these weird Byzantine maneuvers and trades and stuff like that. I mean, MLS roster rules, for good and for bad, are built for chaos, basically, and cobbling a roster together any given year. And I'm sure that's going to be a big part of the conversation in the collective bargaining agreement negotiations this year, is trying to figure things out. I mean, again, you think about it, the biggest amount of clarity any of us ever get as to how anything works behind the scenes salary cap roster rules in MLS is when the MLS Players Union releases those salaries every year, and yet immediately you hear journalists and some team owners and even some players kind of quietly admit that's really only a very small part of the picture. And I think, and that's where it becomes hard for us on the outside.
Yes.
We can be told things and we can hear things, some of it on the record and off, and how exactly do you properly, not even assign blame? I think that's an unfair way to put it, but how do you get a proper picture of how the things are working when not only is so much kind of intentionally left in the cover of darkness, but there's so much that is confusing even to the people who are trying to work within the system.
So true. So true. Let's turn our attention to the team in your backyard. That would be the Portland Timbers. We talk about some of the interesting storylines in MLS for this first part of the season. Of course, Toronto, FC Dallas has been a surprise, but Portland's been an interesting storyline for the opposite reason. 4 points in 7 games, no wins. Obviously, that's not what Timbers fans, Timbers players had in mind when they were going into the season with so much expectation. What have you seen thus far that has gone wrong with Portland, or is it just kind of, I don't want to say bad luck, because it's not bad luck. They've had some poor results.
Yeah, and I think, you make your own luck sometimes because theoretically, on the face of it, you're unlucky to be up 4-2 with 7 minutes to go and to be held to a tie. But by the same token,
Yes.
I think you can look at things and go, A, Seattle did some really good stuff, and B, the Timbers made some mistakes. I don't know. It's really interesting. I mean, I certainly have the advantage of being able to pay closer attention to the Timbers, perhaps, because I'm here and I'm around the coverage, and everywhere I go, people we know and friends of ours, that they're all hardcore Timbers fans. They're all talking about it. I'm not really sure what to make of it so far. I think, when we did the Portland-Seattle game, it was easy for me to say, listen, at this exact same point last year, Timbers hadn't won a game. They kept giving up early goals, having to come back, and everyone was saying, oh, the Timbers, they're not going to be any good. Caleb Porter doesn't know how to coach professional players. Then they won their 5th game, and they went on from there. Well, we're past that point now, and we're getting to a point where I saw another article today on MLSsoccer.com about kind of the historical challenges the Timbers will have from this position to make sure they get back up into the playoffs. And I think, again, like I said, the worst thing that we do here is draw too many broad conclusions. By the same token, you don't want to lose touch too much. You don't want to dig yourself so deep a hole, like Chicago last year again, that it's hard for you to dig out. I think one of the challenges for the Timbers is the fact that everyone expected, and not unrightly so, that they were going to pick up exactly where they left off last year, where in the season opener against Philadelphia, it was basically going to be the 91st minute of the playoff series against Salt Lake, or of their season finale where they hammered Chivas, and it was just going to be, almost a 3-month hibernation, and here we are again. And that's not how MLS works. Again, it's off seasons. It's not even about their length, really. It's just the nature of off seasons in MLS and of roster changes and all that. It really is a starting over process for everyone. And so I think that's part of it. I think also, too, I think they're missing a very important person in Rodney Wallace. I know he's working hard, and he'll probably be back ahead of schedule from the ACL tear. The Timbers medical staff actually has a pretty good track record for that. And he's been doing some of the local TV pre- and post-game, actually, the last couple of weeks, which has been fun to watch. But the thing that Rodney Wallace does that no one else on the roster that's healthy really does is that kind of dynamic athleticism, and not just running, but making the intelligent runs off the ball, trying to stretch a defense. I think right now it's been too easy for teams to just kind of sit and pack things in a little bit against Portland and force them to just pass back and forth in front of you, particularly when you have a center forward in Maxi Urruti who would rather come to the ball, play with his back to goal, and look to combine. That's easier to keep in front of you than a guy that's going to make those runs, or that's going to be a threat in the air that you can kind of lump it into when all else fails. And I think with Rodney Wallace, they had a player last year who could stretch defenses out wide, had the speed. You could play that ball in behind, and he'd get there and cause problems. And I think they're really missing that right now. And for that matter, it's Steve Zakawani, another player who can do that, who I think, similar to Teal Bunbury and the other players, will he ever be close to what he was? I don't know if any of us can say that. And so, with Portland right now, you've got a lot of playmakers. You've got a lot of players who can pass and combine and play some really beautiful, incredibly fun to watch soccer. And when they're in transition, boy, are they good. But if you can get back and get things set up, there's a lot of the same type of player. And I would compare it to Real Salt Lake in this way, because I think the model for the Timbers has been, ever since they were 4 in MLS, has been Real Salt Lake. RSL, like Portland, has those players. They fit in the system. They pass the ball. They play. They combine. They play as a team. But they also have Alvaro Saborio, whose job it is to just score goals. Whatever else, he's going to find a way to score. That's what he's there for. And I don't really feel like Maxi Urruti is that type of player. I don't even think they think he is. And the Timbers kind of lack that. So, it's, again, early in the season. They have their opportunities. They get a home game with DC United, which, even though DC is getting hot, I think that's a good opportunity for them maybe to get over the hump at home at least. But I do wonder if maybe just missing a little bit of dynamic of something that would help unlock all the other really good pieces they have.
But I think that if you're putting your, I don't want to say eggs in a basket, but if you're looking at, Rodney Wallace is ahead of schedule, he'll be back. He's going to add a guy coming back from a torn ACL, and you're expecting athleticism and dynamicism or width. That's a recipe for disaster.
And that's not an unfair point. But again, I think the idea being is they're lacking what he provides. Now, whether it's him or someone else, they're lacking. Every one of the Timbers wants to come to the ball. No one wants to kind of make that run in beyond, get in behind, stretch a defense, make defenders turn their heads. And I think, Rodney's the guy on the team who's built to do that, and he's out right now. Had he never torn his ACL, had he been healthy, we wouldn't perhaps anyway be having the same conversation. Sure. And so, while you're right that it's tough to hang your hat on a guy that's coming back from a major injury, I think again though too they're going to have to, because he provides something that everything else out there needs. Otherwise, I hate the word predictable sounds a bit too harsh and cynical, but you kind of know what the Timbers are going to do, and provided you don't get caught in transition, as we've seen week in, week out. Even most of the goals they scored is when it's not even necessarily counters, but when you're working in transition at times in every single game when the teams can kind of get back and set up their blocks of four and defend. The Timbers are just having a heck of a time fashioning opportunities on goal.
Well, and so do you feel like is it one of those situations where this is a blip, or is this a harbinger of some ominous things to come?
That is the $64,000 question, and I think it's way too early. However, what I will say is it requires a little bit more than just time and patience and eventually get going. I do think it needs some sort of a tweak, and whether it's a player coming back in, whether it's a player like Darlington Nagbe doing what I think those of us who have been around the Timbers for 4 years now have been begging him to do, which is to say, all right, come on, boys, I'm taking this thing over because I know I'm good enough. Whether it's Freddie Piccione emerging into a bigger part of the team, and I've just seen he's dealing with a family emergency back home, so whether or not he'll even be available for this week's game, we'll see. So it's going to require some sort of a change. It doesn't need to be a huge drastic thing, but it can't, agreed, just be, well, we'll get there eventually, because eventually, listen, we're in April, we're going to be in May soon. That is kind of getting on in the season, to be sure. Yeah,
and you brought up the DC United match, which is going to be at home. That's May 3rd. Before that, they've got the Dynamo in Houston on Sunday. I would tend to agree with you about the United match, except for one thing. First of all, United has gotten off to a reasonable start. Their road form has been pretty good. And you talk about lack of width and teams that, or the Timbers having trouble with teams that are going to pack it in. That's exactly what DC United is going to do when they come to Portland, which makes the game a little difficult. And I was looking ahead to Portland's schedule and thinking, okay, well, where are the games where you go, okay, we can get back on track on that game. And really, if you're going to say the DC United match is that match, fine. But other than that, you got LA, you got Houston, you got a Columbus team which is playing so much better than last season. Like we always say in MLS, there are no real cupcake games, especially when you are the team that needs to come back and get some points.
No, agree. And I think the reason why I look at DC is because the following week they've got the Galaxy at home, and that's going to be an NBC match for us.
Yes.
And, that's the one I'm kind of interested to see. You kind of, from a storytelling standpoint, wouldn't mind them at least having one win under their belt, because hopefully that's going to provide them the opportunity to come out and make it a really fun game. By the same token, a really, really ticked off Timbers team might be fun to watch too. I would say with DC, I mean, listen, DC was at the beginning of the season my kind of pick for worst to first. Every year we've got an MLS team that just comes out of nowhere and roars back in a big way. And DC's my pick because I like the veteran pieces they added. I like the young players they started to cultivate in the second half of last year. And also, too, I think everyone around that organization has a real sense of urgency of, we may have to get it right now because we may not be around to figure it out after this year. And I think it's one of the things that I love about MLS. You're right. There is no easy match. There is no game you can look at the schedule. Well, that'll be 3 points. That'll be 3 points. That absolutely hasn't been the case. And I think, it's funny when I think about DC at Portland, that was kind of the game that in a lot of ways blew up and derailed in 2011. If you remember, the Timbers won their first 5 home games. It was like, holy smokes, here comes this expansion team. And then
boom,
DC beat them 3-2 in the game, which featured the Kenny Cooper twice retaken penalty that then Jewsbury scored. And that was kind of the end of Kenny Cooper in a lot of ways in Portland. So, yeah, I mean, you never know when the chaos is going to come, but I do think from a Portland standpoint, it needs to kind of happen fairly soon. And I think for DC too, and it's been good to see them get a couple wins under their belt. I think it's a team that a lot of us kind of quietly root for, just in the sense everyone likes Ben Olsen. Everyone wants to see Ben Olsen succeed. You know how much DC United means to him. You know how much it pains him that they're having the struggles that they're having. And you'd hate to see him be a casualty of some things that aren't working right. with DC United that aren't necessarily his fault. But someone, if it's not going to turn around, someone's going to be the fall guy. It tends to be the coach. Just feels like it'd be kind of harsh on him. So I think, that DC's a team a lot of people would like to see do well from that standpoint. But again, the extent to which Luis Silva's injury has been hurting things a little bit, that's certainly a team that I wouldn't be surprised at all to see, kind of roar back this year and really be a factor, if not necessarily at the top of the Eastern Conference, certainly in that middle band that's going to be getting into the playoffs. And then again, typical, in MLS playoffs, beware the 4-5 team. Those are usually the groups that make the biggest noise.
Yep. Oh, we've got Ned Grabavoy lined up next, and I know you've got to do some unpacking from your run to Costco, and so suburban life, the life and times of a national broadcaster when he's not on the air. Exactly. I was laughing about that with my friend this weekend because he came back from Costco. He's like, "Look at this great deal I got from Costco." I go, "Wow, this is a lot different from our early 20s." Now the highlight of the weekend is look at the great deal I got at Costco.
Hey, listen, we had to get new diapers for the kid. I got some fun spinach and quinoa cakes. I mean, listen, at some point, it can't all be glitz and glamour.
Exactly.
Of, traveling around and doing big time soccer. There's life to be lived as well, and on a budget. So it's you take what you can get.
I totally agree. John Strong, thank you very much for taking some time. I appreciate it, my friend.
Always. Thanks for having me back on.
That's NBC Sports Network's John Strong. As he mentioned, he is off from MLS duties with NBCSN this week. Next week, they'll be back on, and that'll be the weekend of May 3rd. We mentioned the Timbers. We did not mention much about their last match. It was against Real Salt Lake, which they lost 1-0. The goal scorer in that match, Real Salt Lake midfielder Ned Grabavoy, and he joins us right now on Pitch Pass. Ned, how are you, sir?
Good. How you guys doing?
We're good. It's fun times for us. I just got done speaking with John Strong of NBC Sports Network. He was just returning from his run at Costco. I assume you, Ned, with the two youngsters, you're probably making a lot of Costco runs these days yourself.
I am. Yeah, not necessarily Costco all the time, but we have a market right down the street that we're constantly at. Target, a lot of Amazon purchases. So, yeah, I understand. I fully understand all that.
Amazon Prime is your friend because of the free shipping.
Exactly.
How do you balance that? For people who may not know, you have twins who are just over 1 year old now, and you also are a professional soccer player who's on the road a lot. So I'd imagine that's a juggling act.
Yeah, it is. I think there's some positive and negatives to the profession as far as being a father. I mean, obviously, the road trips, when you get back-to-back road trips, you can be gone, multiple weekends in a row. The good thing for us is, now with the difference in the MLS scheduling, we play a lot of games on the West Coast, and so we leave on a Friday. We're back on a Sunday, so we're not usually on these week-long trips to the East Coast or anything like that. The positive side of it is obviously I'm here in the morning with my family.
Yeah.
I'm here to help out, but also, enjoy the time with the kids. And then, most of the time when we're at home, I'm home in the afternoon, sometime around 2 o'clock through the rest of the night. So I'm definitely not going to complain. I feel like I get to spend, plenty of time with my family. I'm there to help out and to see all the special things. And I think that's definitely important.
Well, I'm sure she's a fantastic lady, but how does your wife feel when you give the old toodaloo on Friday afternoon for the weekend?
When I take off out of town?
Yes.
Well, it's, I think, I'll put it this way. I think this year things are a lot different than they were last year, and the circumstances are a lot different. So last year was really difficult. Obviously, just, constantly feeding a child, not, sleeping through the night, all of those things. And so I feel like the first year was definitely difficult, having two small babies. It's a little bit easier now. They are pretty good sleepers, knock on wood. And so things have become a little bit easier with the everyday life stuff. But at the same time, I think that, she'd rather have me around and be there. But at the same time, I think that she understands my love for soccer, and it is is a means of life and a way to make a living. And so obviously that understanding is there from her as well.
you're in an as ideal of a situation as possible to begin your family as a professional athlete could be. You bounced around a lot, but for the last few years, you've been settled. You've been playing with Real Salt Lake. Things are going well with Real Salt Lake. How important, or let me ask you it this way, would it have been possible to start this family and to do this pre-RSL when you were kind of moving around a lot?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, there's probably different people have different situations and different work lives and all those things, that have families. And so I definitely think it would have been possible. Now on the flip side, like you said, I've been stable here now in the same area for the last, 5 years. This is my sixth season with RSL. And so places grow on you and you become comfortable the longer you're in a place. You become friends with more people. Just knowing the area and how to get around and all those things is great as far as, being comfortable in your everyday life. And so we definitely could have done it. I'm sure there's people that are in much more difficult situations, than we would be, or that, quote unquote soccer player, and still have families. And so I think you have to remind yourself a little bit, you're not the only one with kids. You're not the only one with twins. There's a lot of people out there in the world doing it. And so you just have to remind yourself to sometimes just take all the good in.
Let me ask you this, because I work in radio, and our two most important times of year are spring and fall. So we can't take vacations during that time and such. Sure. I relate it to you being in season. You're in season from basically February to November. Is there anything in the back of your mind where you think to yourself, it'd be better if we timed this birth sometime December, January? Does that factor in your head at all? Like it factored into my head when I was having my kids?
Well, I mean, obviously, our season, is over the time period that it is. And it's always been that way in Major League Soccer. And so we can't necessarily change things. The fact now that, my kids are still not in school. And so I'm sure a parent, that has children in school, during that time would maybe rather have it in the summer when their kids are out of school and able to travel. But I think all players, kind of become accustomed a little bit to the scheduling. We know pretty much for the most part, once preseason starts at the beginning of February, there's not going to be much time to take trips with families, to get away with friends or whatever it might be. You're really kind of limited to the days off, I guess, in a row. You're usually not going to get 4 or 5 day breaks for multiple reasons. And so we just kind of become used to that. But we used to travel quite a bit, pre-kids, overseas or to warm weather in the off season. And so that's just when a lot of people have to make their travel and vacation plans. Well,
I appreciate that answer, Ned. I was more asking if you are timing births in that little window.
Oh, okay. I didn't catch that part of it. No. In fact, to be honest with you, I had just gone to my first day of preseason when my kids were born. So if there was any planning, or if anyone is that good at planning it, it's definitely not me. If anything, I'm on the other spectrum of that because I was not good with the timing. Let's just put it that way.
I want to talk to you about your goal this past week versus Portland. It is up for goal of the week. I voted for you, not because I'm a huge RSL fan, Ned, but more so you're on the show. I figured show you some love and vote for your goal for goal of the week. And as I was watching it, I'm noticing something. You take a pass. Darlington Nagbe comes up to close you down. You blow by him. And everybody kind of talks about Darlington Nagbe's speed. You blew by him, Ned. Who knew you had that kind of speed in your back pocket?
He's, now you got to remember now on the other end of the field, I've been playing against him for a few years. And to be honest with you, I'm usually not one to praise other players that much, but I will tell you he's one of my favorite players in the league. And he's really fast. He'd probably rather be running the other way,
of course,
than trying to chase a guy into his own box. And so I'm not going to sit here and say I turned on the Jets or anything like that. he may have been maybe sneaking and looking to try to counter the other way, if anything, because he has unbelievable pace, and his first couple steps are some of the quickest in the league.
So I'm going to put 2 and 2 together because I said that you blew by him. Your response was, he's really, really fast. Ergo, you're really, really fast because you blew by a guy who was really, really fast. That's what I'm putting together.
Okay.
And I also like you did turn on the Jets, and I did see in his eyes at that moment, because they showed the super slow-mo replay, I did see the OS moment where he realized you were past him.
Yeah, and then about 6 or 7 minutes later, he pulled a move on me on the other side, and I decided there was no way I was probably going to catch up to him, and I pretty much just hacked him down. So, no, I think he's plenty much faster than me, but I just think at that moment of the game, like I said, I mean, decisions have to be made, and like I said, I think he'd probably rather be sprinting up the field the other way with the ball than without.
The coaching change that you guys had in the offseason from Jason Kreif's to Jeff Kazar, it seemed like from the outside that this was a change, and the reason Jeff was chosen was because there would be as little bit of unsettling of what the organization is, what the franchise is, promoting from within. Did you find, or have you found that to be the case this year thus far?
Well, I think that was probably something that factored into management's decision, to name Jeff the head coach. But, from an everyday perspective of a guy who's been here for a while, Jeff's put in an incredible amount of work. And he's grown as a head coach, and he's learned, over his course of time, not just here, but previously. And so I think he's someone that definitely deserved it as well. And I know that he was part of the RSL family before being named and all those things. But I think that it was, a little bit of both of those things that ultimately, led to him being named the head coach. And I think that as a group, definitely know from the veteran core, we were happy to see that because he definitely understands, how we like to play, how we train. He's understood all those things because he's been here. And so, like you said, I think that there was just less questions to be answered in having Jeff. The team couldn't be happier.
This may seem like a cliche question, but I do want to hear your answer on the mindset of RSL, because as I looked at it, you guys are in the middle. In the middle is even a weird way to say it, but you guys are in the middle of a really, really great run as far as results over the course of seasons are concerned. The fear, I thought, was after you guys had that Champions League run a few years ago, and then Olave leaves, and then Johnson leaves, and now Christ leaves, you think to yourself, okay, this was a small market team who was kind of captured a little magic, and now that window is slowly closing. That hasn't happened yet, and that's why I say middle as opposed to end of the run. The question is, how hard is it, or what is the difference in the mindset of a team who is on top, who is fighting, I guess, to stay there versus a team that is climbing their way to the top, as you guys were a few years ago?
Yeah, well, obviously, when you've been one of the more consistent teams in the league, you're going to start to have a target on your back a little bit, and you're going to get, most of the time, everyone's best game. And so you look at some of the other teams in the league that have been very consistent, and you look at an LA Galaxy. When they go on the road or they play at home, they're going to get everyone's best shot. Everybody wants to beat, teams that are in the top, and everyone's really trying, to impose their will. And those games aren't going to be taken lightly by opponents. And so I'm sure that has a little to do with it. And for us as a group, I don't think we ever thought that after the Champions League run that our window was going to close. We looked at it. We knew what we had. When we had great players that hadn't even really contributed at that point, but through training and reserve games, we knew would be able to step up in big moments for us, and they proved that over the next couple of seasons. And so we look at it a little bit as sometimes we're called old. We've heard maybe the window's closed on us, but I guess my response to that would be, I look at some of the other teams in other sports that are consistently good. They're all kind of considered the same thing. I mean, they're all considered older teams. I think, to be able to keep a group together that's proven that they can win games is a really, really important thing in this league. Now, I think every team has talent. Every team has good individual players, young and old. But to have proven winners on your team that have done it together as a group, I think is highly important in this league.
As a fan of the Philadelphia Phillies, that answer makes me feel a little sad because they are a team that has gotten old, and they kept that core together, and they may have kept that core together a little too long, and now we're seeing a team barely treading water in their sports. You guys have avoided that, but. And I know the coach and the front office, their job is to reload when things like that happen, when salary cap situations come into play. But as a guy in the locker room, when people do leave and leave for reasons that in other sports might not happen, is there ever an, oh, really? That guy's got to leave too situation? Does that ever cross your mind?
Well, I mean, there's always going to be turnover at the end of each year. And, probably previously, in MLS, pre this last bargaining agreement, you saw a lot of it. I mean, most rosters were 50% turnover every year. I think you see teams now being smarter, identifying players that they want in their system and for their team, not just for one season, but for multiple seasons. And so I think we've done as well a job as we can, management and coaching staff-wise, to keep as many good players here as we can. I'd also like to say that it's credit to some RSL players as well that have maybe sacrifice, something financially that a lot of these players could maybe find somewhere else, whether that be overseas or on a different team, because we all believe in what we're doing. And so I think when you get that collective belief, and unselfishness, you can make something go a little bit longer than maybe it should. But we obviously knew, the one season that we were going to have to trade away 3 really good players, that it was just a numbers game and a salary cap situation. And so it was unfortunate to lose 3 of those guys because they'd been in our team for so long and played in so many big games with us. But at the same time, we understand it's a part of the business as well. And you just have to move on. And you basically are going to start each new season with somewhat of a different group, whether that be large turnover or smaller. It's just part of the business, and you learn to adapt to it a little bit.
And those 3 players leaving the team, leaving the state, makes them now ineligible for the State of the State Awards. Kyle Beckerman won favorite male athletes of the year recently. That means you must move up, and at some point you're thinking to yourself, well, Ned Grabavoy has got to be a contender for next year.
I actually heard that we did win quite a bit of these awards.
Yes.
This morning. It sounded like Nick had won an award as well for Save of the Year, and we had won a few other awards as well. It's great, especially for those guys. Those are the leaders of our team. They've done so much for not just our team, but for the community in the state of Utah. I know the guys couldn't be happier to see those guys get all the credit that they deserve. They get a lot of it, but they certainly deserve all of it, if not more. And so for us, I think a little bit the recognition is good to know that our fan base is growing and strong. Because once again, without the fans, we probably don't have what we have.
Do you feel an extra pressure playing in a city where MLS is more covered by the local media than, say, Los Angeles, where you played, or San Jose, San Francisco area, where there are bigger or more established sports that take up a lot of the attention?
No, not necessarily. I think soccer is growing in this country because it's very different than the other sports. And I think that, we're on track to keep growing our fan base. The league is certainly getting better. The talents and just the overall player level is certainly improving. And so I think it's one of those things where maybe it's good that soccer's a bit different. And it's taken people a little bit of time, and I think it's still going to take people more time to understand the game and really have a knowledge of the game and all those things for our sport to grow. But no, I don't think we can't look at, going to a bigger city, like you said, whether we're playing the Galaxy or Chivas or whoever. Really the focus is just going on the road and trying to get a result. The league's going to grow and soccer's going to continue to grow in this country. Obviously, we're ambassadors, for the sport, but at the same time, I think since I came into the league, certainly 10 seasons ago, the league is just completely different. It's night and day.
So as we record, there is a big game tonight. It is Blues 2-1 over the Blackhawks heading into Game 4.
I do not watch many games anymore. I will be honest with you. I have had this game circled on my calendar from about 2 weeks left in the NHL season. I'm a big hockey fan, big Blackhawks fan. My son is wearing a Jonathan Toews jersey right now as he's inside eating dinner. And so I've had this one circled for a while. It's on at 7:30 out here Utah time, so that the children will be asleep. I'd certainly be watching this game, and I'm hoping that the Hawks can crawl back into the series here and even things up.
Why this game? Why did you have Game 4 circled on your calendar 2 weeks in the regular season left?
Well, I thought that this series was going to go 6 or 7 games. And so when I was looking at the games, I think they played Saturday afternoon, game day. And then I believe they played Monday night, but they were the earlier game. And so for me, this is perfect timing. I mean, 7:30. I can't DVR the sports.
No, of course.
And go back and watch them a little bit. It's too tough. I'm getting text messages, and it's just too tough to not know the score and catch back up to real time. So this game starts at 7:30 tonight. Perfect timing. Kids will be asleep. I'll be able to watch the game and enjoy it. And it's a huge game. Last game here at the United Center before things head back to St. Louis. So I'm hoping they can crawl back in. Unfortunately, I think handed away the first 2 games. I don't know if anybody had seen them, but lost both games in overtime, and so they're a little bit backs against the wall.
Yeah, I didn't even ask a question. I just brought up the series. You immediately jump in.
I'm a Chicago guy.
Seriously, I felt the excitement. You visibly lifted.
I can sit here and talk to you about the Blackhawks in the playoffs, or we can talk about the Chicago Cubs, and we're certainly going to talk about the first one.
Yeah, and I don't know if you watched any of the 100th birthday for Wrigley today. It was very, very, very Cubs-like loss today for them.
Yeah, I was kind of diehard Cubs for a while, and I think the last couple seasons I'm kind of just like, I haven't thrown in the towel, but I'm kind of more or less reassessing my overall love for the team, or just kind of what my overall goal or accomplishments for the team are, because it's been difficult. Cole Grossman, a teammate, has just been killing me nonstop about how the Cardinals are so good and the Cubs are terrible. And I feel like I'm a decent debater and bring up, somewhat valid points, but it's tough when they just haven't done anything.
You have no tools for that debate, Ned. No tools.
Yeah, it's difficult. That's when I kind of just, I try to steer myself into, hey, did you ever watch the Chicago Bulls play during the 90s? They were pretty good. I try to bring myself back to happier memories of Chicago sports.
As an East Coast guy, I didn't really comprehend the St. Louis-Chicago rivalry, which I'm assuming is another reason why this NHL playoff series is really, really important to you.
It is, but it's a little bit like, I know it's a big rivalry, but I think that you get that a lot with Midwestern cities. It's kind of like whose city is more blue collar and hardworking. For me, a little bit, it's like St. Louis, go away. Like the Blues, have a pretty good team. They've never won a Stanley Cup. The Blackhawks have won a few, and a few recently in the past, 4 or 5 seasons. So I'm not trying to, I think it's giving St. Louis a little bit too much credit, to be honest with you. Now, they could win the series, but I'm just saying, from my perspective, it's maybe giving St. Louis a little bit too much credit.
I feel you, and I almost feel like I was going to say you probably are against St. Louis MLS expansion, but to me it feels like this is so deep-seated in you that you want them to have a franchise so that you can then stick a finger in their eye with some sort of game-winning goal for whatever team you're playing for.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see another Midwest team in the league. I just think that there's some great sports cities. If you find and tap the right market, I think you get unbelievable support in the fan base. And so, one of those cities in there, St. Louis or Minneapolis or something, somewhere in there, I just think that there's got to be another market where a city can really, grasp the support of a group. And so we'll see how it goes, but I wouldn't mind a team in St. Louis. Yeah, for sure.
Last thing before I let you go, we were talking about NHL playoffs. Obviously, you feel that you get excited about it. A lot of people will tell you that the NHL playoffs are the most exciting of all the sports playoffs. How close is MLS playoffs to that NHL reputation, and what does it need to do to catch up and maybe overtake NHL playoffs for excitement?
Yeah, I do think the NHL playoffs is the best. I think MLS playoffs are highly competitive and have to be extremely fun to watch. I think they've done a pretty good job here of tinkering with the format, to try to draw in more fans, increase the storylines. And so I think you now have the two-leg series, that makes things interesting, especially when the team goes on the road and then returns home for a game. And so they're doing some different things, I think, to definitely make the games interesting. And I just think when you get a league that has more parity, like MLS does, the games are so close anyways. I mean, there's teams that aren't making the playoff every season that if they're in the playoffs can win games in advance. And so I just think the parity in the league is going to help, keep making the MLS playoffs and the MLS Cup that much more exciting.
I felt like we had a good conversation, Ned. I felt like we bonded. So I will ask you a question, and maybe you'll just spill the beans in this whole situation. But your goal celebration, you want to give any insights, any clues as to what the meaning is?
Yeah, it was just shaking the dice. I was trying to just throw the dice and get hot. I feel like the first 6 or 7 games I've kind of been in and around the box. Maybe haven't done as well with some finishing, and so I kind of was, pushing a little bit for a goal and wanting to get on a little run. Sometimes you get streaky and you start to get, 3-4 games, you find yourself a couple goals. And so all I was trying to do is just roll the dice and get hot a little bit. And then I think someone had jumped on my back and tackled me. So, I had to stand back up and try to throw the dice again.
So is it more craps, or is it more, which I would love if it was the latter, if you did the little shaking of the dice and then just yelled Yahtzee as loud as you could?
You know what it was? I don't know what I was trying to roll, but it was something good to get hot and get the team hot and get going. Sometimes when you score a goal and you start to run, towards the corner where your fans are screaming, you black out a little bit. You lose your thought process, and you kind of just grab the first thing that comes to your mind. I don't plan these things out in advance. It's just what comes to mind that quick.
Fantastic. Ned Grabavoy, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you taking some time to talk with us.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Pitch Pass.
This is your voice. This is my red, white, and blue. This is my anthem to you.
For more show information, go to pitchpass.com.